A very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of Ahmedabad OBGYN Society, I welcome you all faculty, our panelists, our moderator, and all the participants for this unique program that is on adenomyosis, which is the most frustrated pathology. I welcome Dr. Kuldeep Jain, who has joined us from Delhi, and he's contesting for the post of Vice President Foxy and from North Zone. And I welcome you, sir, and from AOGS, we give you all the best for your candidature and all the best for your election process. I welcome Dr. Divyesh Shukla, who has joined from Baroda, and Dr. Praful Doshi from Mumbai, from Surat, and I welcome you all. And I welcome our local faculty, Dr. Sunil Bhai, Dr. Chirag, Dr. Tejas, Dr. Parul Bhai Kotrawala, because he is one of the key factors for designing this session. And I welcome Dr. Yamini Ben, Dr. Manish, Dr. Sujal, Dr. Bhavit, and all. And over to you, Sunil, for further proceedings.
So, thank you very much, Dr. Rajalben. Good evening, everybody. So, our first presentation is of Dr. Parul Bhai. Dr. Parul Kotrawala is an endoscopic surgeon and a consultant gynecologist. Just now, sir is working in VS Hospitals and NHL Municipal Medical College, as well as at Zydus Hospital. His own private clinic is at Kotrawala Clinic. And currently, sir is a vice chairman of ICOG 2020. He is a vice president ISOPAR 2020. He was vice president of Foxy in year 2006. He was a past president of SOGOC 2009. He was a past president of Ahmedabad Obstetric and Gynecological Society year 2007-2008. He was a managing committee member of ISAR 2014-18 and managing committee member of IAGE 2012 to 2016. He is a Indian coordinator for NESA, that is a New European Surgical Academy, and he is a coordinator of International Adhesion Society. I welcome Dr. Parul Bhai to present his presentation on this frustrating pathology for the woman, and Dr. Parul Bhai is going to speak on are adenomyosis and endometriosis sibling? I invite Dr. Parul Bhai to speak on the subject.
Thank you, Sunil. I hope my slide is seen. Well, let me.
Yes. We need your voice to be a little louder.
Okay. Am I audible now? Hello.
Yes, come a little closer. This is fine enough. When you are closer, the sound is much clear.
My face will be zoomed in.
No, okay. That's the better. You look more better when you are closer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sunil. We are all part of AOGS, so it is a home show. We have only one colleague from outside Gujarat, and Dr. Kuldeep, and it was his initiation that do some webinar in Gujarat, and we started thinking about it. There were various topics available, but I felt that adenomyosis is a big frustration for me, and most of you also would be feeling the same. So we opted for this topic, and let us see. I'm sure we have very expert people involved in this program, and they will shed some light on the problem, how to deal with it. Now, the title, in fact, is something which came to my mind just off the cuff. I had just mentioned are adenomyosis and endometriosis sibling, but I never thought that I'll be speaking on this. And I was telling Dr. Rajal that how come that this was given as a topic to me anyway. Let me share with you what we have gone through regarding adenomyosis. When we were students 30 years back, we always used to see adenomyosis in the age group of 40 to 50. And so it was a little bit easier for us to deal with it. pain and AUB were the main complaints for the patient, and simple treatment was hysterectomy. Subsequently, of late, now we are seeing young age people getting adenomyosis. Now we are seeing young age, not only young age, but also localized adenomyosis. Previously, it was never a localized adenomyosis. It was always generalized adenomyosis. So now and many women are postponing maternity also. So this has become a complex issue, and I'm sure Dr. Kuldeep will deal with it in handling infertility in adenomyosis. So current status is very awkward. Ultrasound is not very accurate, and we have to, by and large, resort to MRI. Surgery, hysterectomy is easy to handle, but now with infertility kicking in and very young age patients coming up, it becomes a big problem. See, today morning only I did a laparoscopic hysterectomy on a 29-year-old woman. I spent 2 hours with her counseling that it is not required at your age, but she said, "Doctor, can you assure me that this pain will not return?" It was a localized adenomyoma of 4 centimeters. And she had had 1 IVF pregnancy only. So she said, "I do not want any further children. I do not want pain. Please remove the uterus." And ultimately, I had to do it even at the age of 29. Now, what is the relation with endometriosis? We often in our textbook read that it is endometriosis interna, and what we call endometriosis is endometriosis externa. So that sibling thought came to just my mind, and I was wondering that has anybody else also thought about it? Yesterday, I was surfing the net, and what I saw was interesting. This is Endometriosis Australia, and they are mentioning endometriosis sister to adenomyosis sister to endometriosis or a distant cousin. And this is as recent as 13th July. Another article, the evil twin sister of endometriosis, what you need to know about adenomyosis. So people also have been thinking on the similar line that there is a big relation between these two. However, treatment may be different. Now, we all know that the origin of both these diseases may be from endometrium. Endometrium is mother of both these problems. If this endometrium goes inside the muscle, then it is endometriosis interna or adenomyosis. It passes through the tube and deposits on the peritoneal surface. It becomes endometriosis. So, of course, the mother is same, gene pool is same. So these are twin sisters, isn't it? One sister goes inside the muscle, she chooses there, and then she is trapped there. So she is in a jail, but she creates havoc there by expanding, creating problem. The other sister goes into the peritoneal cavity, she is free to grow, and she may develop cysts or peritoneal studded endometriosis. But perhaps this is the only relation that we know of. Maybe the panel will give us more relation between these two and highlight it to us more. Thank you very much, and let us listen to what our experts are telling us.
Thank you very much for knowing us and how they are of the same genes, Dr. Parul Bhai, about the adenomyosis and endometriosis. Now I invite Dr. Chirag Amin, our next speaker. He is a consultant high-risk pregnancy expert, and he is at Sterling Hospital for that. He is an ex-honorary endoscopic obstetrician and gynecologist, VS General Hospital. He is doing private practice for more than 26 years at Amin's Hospital for Women at ISO 9001 certified NABH accredited hospital, and his main areas of interest is endoscopic surgery, live 3D, 4D, USG, color Doppler, infertility, and high risk obstetrics. Dr. Chirag Bhai is a very good friend of mine, and he has many more abilities other than the gynecology and obstetrics. He is expert in analyzing so many things, politics and finance also. But today we will take his knowledge benefit in terms of a diagnostic challenges in diagnosis of adenomyosis. Dr. Chirag Bhai, welcome and enlighten us for the diagnosis for the adenomyosis.
Thank you, Sunil, for the kind words. Uh, I, at the beginning, I would like to thank AOGS for giving me this opportunity, and definitely very nice topic to discuss, because it has been a definite dilemma and day-to-day problem associated with our practice. So we would discuss about the diagnostic challenges, but before that, as Dr. Parul Bhai told, that whether it's a twin sister or not. So let us see if there is some evidence which is telling about it. So is endometrium in the adenomyosis, which is found in the lesion, is it ectopic or utopic? That is a point. So this has been debated for more than a century. Cullen was the earliest person, 1908, and some of his colleagues, they supported the view that adenomyoma involves the invasion of endometrium within the myometrium. And as early as 1908, Cullen was able to establish continuity between ectopic and utopic endometrium in 58 out of the 73 cases he examined. So that means that it is a continuation from inside the endometrial cavity. An apparent lack of continuity between the basal and ectopic endometrium in some cases, however, was used by Cullen to allow for vascular or lymphatic invasion as a possible route for transporting endometrium deep within the muscle layer. So he thought that possibly it can also be transported through vascular or lymphatic lesion. However, Mayer in 1926, through extensive histologic investigations, showed that the existence of connection is always there between the endometrial islands in the myometrium and the basal endometrium. So in all the cases of adenomyosis, you will find connection. So MJ in 1962 stressed that such a connection was difficult to demonstrate in cases where there is stromal atrophy and myometrial hypertrophy. So as the glands invade the myometrium, later on there is myometrial hypertrophy, which can prevent the histology specimen to show direct continuity, but most of the cases do have continuity from the endometrial cavity. So Bird, finally 1972, he gave a definition which considered adenomyosis as the benign invasion of endometrium into the myometrium, producing a diffusely enlarged uterus, which microscopically exhibits ectopic, non-neoplastic endometrial glands and the stroma, which is surrounded by hypertrophic and hyperplastic myometrium. So this is a standard definition of adenomyosis still we use. So Parul Bhai's issue is correct that it is a twin sibling, practically. Now, what are the challenges which we face while we try to diagnose adenomyosis? Until now, there were lack of reliable diagnostic tools, with diagnosis only achievable on a hysterectomy specimen. Mapping the extent of the disease after hysterectomy is resource intensive and is rarely undertaken because it has no applications outside research. It is just for academic purpose. Advances in non-invasive diagnostic procedures such as ultrasound and MRI has made diagnosis and extent of disease to be mapped in case of infertility, menstrual abnormalities, and dysmenorrhea. Some 15 years ago, FIGO tried to initiate a process to produce an agreed classification, but this did not progress. The classification could be either histological or image-based. Now, image-based would be better because all cases would not undergo hysterectomy and histology. So Van der Bos actually in 2015 suggested morphological uterus sonographic assessment, which is, he termed it as a MUSA. And he gave a set criteria for imaging-based classification, which included the location of disease, classification of the lesion, presence or absence of intra-lesion cyst, involvement of myometrium, how much is the extent of the disease and the site of lesions. Now, for a clinician, it's a diagnostic dilemma. So my topic which was given is the issues as far as diagnostic part is concerned. So we will stick to that. Ultrasound is as at present, the best standard available to us, and transvaginal scan is the best available standard in routine practice, which we can use to diagnose adenomyosis. So there are certain criteria which will help in diagnosis. So we one by one, we will discuss all the criteria. The first and commonest criteria would be uterine enlargement. A globular uterine enlargement that is generally up to 12 centimeter in uterine length, and that is not explained by presence of leiomyoma, is a characteristic finding. So on examination, we see that uterus is bulky, and on examination, we find there is a generalized enlargement. This is a common finding in an elder patient, who has little more age. Second common criteria is the cystic anechoic spaces or lakes in the myometrium on transvaginal scan. The cystic anechoic spaces within the myometrium are variable in size and can occur throughout the myometrium. Can be small arcuate veins also rather than adenomyos. So whenever we find such kind of cyst, you can see the arrow where you find small hypoechoic cysts inside the lesion. It is always better to put a color Doppler on, and this helps in the differentiation. Microcyst. The presence of submucosal microcyst constitutes the principal direct sign of adenomyosis. Histologic analysis reveals that these cysts to consist of islets of ectopic endometrium accompanied by a cystic glandular dilatation. This is one of the MRI image which shows microcysts. So MRI also reveals round cystic foci ranging from 2 to 7 millimeter in diameter with a mean around 3 millimeter that are embedded within the myometrium. They are usually located within the junctional zone. We will discuss what is the junctional zone later on, although microcysts of outer myometrium also have been described. These structures have water signal on MRI with hypodense signal on T1 weighted imaging and hyperdense intense signal on T2 weighted imaging. So we will also see what is T1 and T2 weighted images. The third important criteria which we will see is a uterine wall thickening. The uterine wall thickening can show antero-posterior asymmetry, especially when the disease is focal. Nowadays, we are seeing more of focal adenomyosis. Because of this focal adenomyosis, this can push the endometrium on one side, either anterior or posteriorly. And you can see very nicely that this is the endometrial cavity, which is not in the center. It has been pushed because of the adenomyotic lesion. Here also, you can see that the cavity has been pushed on one side because of the adenomyotic lesion. This is one of the characteristics, the wall thickening. Pushing the endometrium posterior and on left side. Here also you can see that the lesion is pushing the endometrial cavity on one side. This is a severe form of focal adenomyosis, and you can see the endometrial cavity. If we compare the anterior and posterior walls, you can see that anterior wall is showing 24 millimeter of length and posterior wall is showing only 9 millimeter to 10 millimeter. So this area has the lesion, and because of that, the endometrial cavity has been pushed posteriorly. You can see here, this is the endometrial cavity, and this is the whole focal lesion you can find. You can see. This is the Doppler image of the same patient. Fourth criteria which we would find is subendometrial echogenic linear striations. So there will be linear striations which are found from the endometrial cavity. The invasion of endometrial glands into the submyometrial tissue induces a hyperplastic reaction which appears as a echogenic linear striations fanning out from the endometrial layer. Here also you can see the same phenomena. Because of the lesion, the endometrial cavity has been pushed anteriorly. There is heterogeneous echotexture. The fifth criteria is heterogeneous echotexture. There is lack of homogeneity within the myometrium with evidence of architectural disturbance. This finding has been shown to be the most predictive of adenomyosis. You can see in this image, all the areas will show different varieties of echogenicity. That is very typical of adenomyosis developing. Sixth criteria is obscure endometrial or myometrial border. So the endometrial cavity, when you try to find out and delineate, you will find that the endometrial and myometrial border is delineation is diminishing. So because of the invasion of the myometrium by the glands. So it obscures the normally distinct endometrial or myometrial border. So here it is difficult to find where is the endometrial cavity. This is one of the very peculiar finding, that is thickening of the transition zone. Now, what is the transition zone? This zone is a layer that appears as a hypoechoic halo surrounding the endometrial layer. A thickness of 12 millimeter or greater has been shown to be associated with adenomyosis. The myocytes of the junctional zone or the transition zone have different morphologic characteristics than those of the outer endometrium. Junctional zone myocytes present a greater relative nuclear area, a looser extracellular matrix, and a lower water content. The architectural organization of the inner myometrium is unique, with a concentric arrangement of the smooth muscle fibers, in contrast to the longitudinal orientation of the smooth muscles in outer myometrium. Now, this differentiation between the two, that is the junctional zone, is difficult on ultrasound, but it is very much visible in MRI. So we'll see how it looks. So the study of transition zone has gained a lot of popularity in recent years. And as the evaluation of junctional zone is not very satisfactory with 2D ultrasound, remaining 6 criteria are more useful for TVS ultrasound. 3D scan definitely gives a good overview of the transition zone, but MRI is the gold standard in study of transition zone. This is an image. We can identify how a 3D ultrasound can help the differentiation. So junctional zone, if you try to see, in first image, this is a normal junctional zone. You can identify the endometrial cavity borders very nicely. Second image is of moderate adenomyosis, which has got minor irregular junctional zone. So you can find that there is invasion, and here there is obscuring of the junctional zone. So you are not able to identify the cavity properly at this area. Somewhere also, here also, and at the fundus also. And this is a severe form of adenomyosis. This is thickened irregular junctional zone, where it is not possible to adequately differentiate the endometrial myometrial transition. This is a severe form of adenomyosis. So 3D scan definitely can help a bit. So before going for MRI, we will just try to find out what are the common terms used in MRI. One is the repetition time, that is the TR, is the amount of the time between successive pulse sequences applied to the same slice. And time to echo, these are the two common variations which are done. Time to echo TE is the time between the delivery of the RF pulse and the receipt of the echo signal. The most common MRI sequences are T1 weighted and T2 weighted scans. So T1 weighted scans are produced by using short TE and TR times. So if your TE, TR times are short, you will find T1 weighted images. The contrast and brightness of the image are predominantly determined by T1 properties of the tissue. Conversely, T2 weighted images are produced by using longer TE and TR times. In these images, the contrast and brightness are predominantly determined by the T2 properties of the tissue. If we simply try to identify in general, T1 and T2 weighted images can be easily differentiated by looking at the CSF. CSF is dark on T1 weighted imaging and bright on T2 weighted imaging. So now we will see how it looks on uterus. This is the MRI study of a junctional zone. You can identify that this is a T2 weighted image, and you can see hypoechoic junctional zone completely here. This is the delineation from the junctional zone and outer myometrium, and you can see that it has thickened out. So this is a typical characteristic of junctional zone, which serve to decrease the signal of this zone on T2 weighted imaging. So because the signal is lesser, this is hypoechoic. And you can see so good delineation on MRI that you can measure the thickness of the junctional zone, and you can identify that this patient has got adenomyosis. So what are the criteria on MRI? There is a cyclical variation in thickness of junctional zone. but it appears that a thickness of up to 8 millimeter is considered to be normal. The thickening of junctional zone can perhaps be caused by a process of myometrial infiltration. And generally, a junctional zone thickness of greater than 12 millimeter is the most widely accepted criteria in establishing the presence of adenomyosis. The studies have been performed show that there is a sensitivity from 70 to 86% and a specificity of 86 to 93% with a mean accuracy of 87.5%. So whenever in doubt, MRI would give a better clue as far as adenomyosis is concerned. Cyclical variation in junction zone is found. Embryologically, cells of endometrium and cells of the junctional zones have a common Mullerian origin, whereas the outer myometrium is of non-Mullerian mesenchymal origin. As a result, the outer myometrium presents little or no dependence on hormonal stimulation, and there is no significant variation in its thickness during the reproductive cycle. As a result of this hormonal influence, the maximal thickness of junctional zone is reached during menstrual phase. So the time of menstrual cycle when MRI is done has to be noted. Whenever you do MRI, just note which was the time. This is a good image which shows diffuse adenomyosis. This is a T2 weighted image. The thickening of junctional zone forms a area of low signal intensity. You can see this significant area with punctate high intensity myometrial foci. These are the foci, and these are the endometrial tissue which are bleeding at the time of period. So MRI gives excellent image telling us confirmed evidence of adenomyosis. The presence of leiomyoma can adversely affect the diagnostic capability of sonography, and the presence of leiomyoma is generally associated with adenomyosis in 36 to 50% of cases. So TVS has diagnostic limitations when leiomyoma is present along with adenomyosis. In this case also, MRI is particularly helpful. So suppose there is a leiomyoma, you can see there is a leiomyoma here. If there is adenomyosis in the posterior wall, because ultrasound will have a limitation, the sound wave will not be able to penetrate there, and you cannot identify whether adenomyosis is there or not, associated with it or not. But MRI will definitely tell you. So with proper evaluation of TVS and liberal use of MRI, we can diagnose adenomyosis and its severity with a significant accuracy. It is important to diagnose adenomyosis at an early developmental stage, as it is a progressive disease which is reversible if timely treatment is initiated. So any questions will be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chirag bhai. We will take question answer in the panel section.
Okay.
Right?
Fine.
And if anybody is having any question, they can put their questions on the chat box. So in between, if we have a chance, I will take that questions.
Correct.
Now I invite Dr. DVS Bhai. DVS Shukla is a very good endoscopic surgeon. Dr. DVS Bhai is a director of ISA Hospital. He is a consultant gynecological laparoscopic surgeon. He is a past associate professor of Government Medical College, Baroda. His clinic is a FOXI recognized and Karl Storz supported training center in gynecological endoscopy. He has more than 200 guest lectures at his name at the state, national and international conferences. He has many publications and papers to his credit. He has many accreditation with the FOXI, and he is a FOXI committee member past and present. DVS Bhai will be speaking on adenomyosis and AUB. DVS Bhai, welcome and give your presentation.
Thanks, Sunil bhai, for your kind words of introduction. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My presentation is adenomyosis. Is additionally required to be known for this particular disease. Circumstantial evidence has suggested that
DVS, sorry to interrupt you, but your voice, sorry to interrupt you, but your voice is not clear. So
Okay. Is it clear now? Better?
yes, yes, now it's better.
Okay. The circumstantial evidence suggests that adenomyosis and endometriosis, they're caused by trauma. And the tissue injury and repair theory was proposed by Landaker in 2009, which says that it is the trauma which causes endometriosis and adenomyosis in a given patient. The basis of this is molecular biology, and it explains in similar way of tissue injury and repair as we see in mesenchymal tissue, neurons, tendons, and cartilage. Trauma initiates secretion of interleukins, COX-2 inhibitors, in turn would stimulate steroidogenesis, would cause increased estrogen secretion. You can have an iatrogenic trauma, or you can have auto-traumatization. In a given patient where there is hyperestrogenic state, you would have the increased peristaltic activity of the inner myometrium, which is called as archimyometrium, the inner myometrium, which can cause disruption of the basal layer and would initiate a process of adenomyosis near the basal layer. Similarly, the implants which would be there over the surface of uterus also would cause invagination and endometriotic disease over the surface of uterus. When we classify abnormal uterine bleeding, we go according to Palm and Cohen. It has been classified as adenomyosis AUB-A. That's how it has been classified. When we do not see any other additional pathology, we'll have about 30 to 65% of patients with abnormal uterine bleeding having adenomyosis. And when hysterectomy specimens were identified on histology, the prevalence of adenomyosis was seen up to 50%. Patients who have adenomyosis are expected to have 50% patient about are expected to have increased duration of bleeding and heavy menstrual bleeding. The heaviness of bleeding would depend upon the penetration of more endometriotic implants penetrate the myometrium. More would be the incidence of heavy menstrual bleeding. Dr. Chirag already has told us about the diagnosis by transvaginal sonography and MRI. Some authors have suggested hysteroscopic biopsies for adenomyosis diagnosis. I haven't done any. In a given patient, couple of patients where we wanted to find out for academic reason, we had taken biopsies by scissors only, but certain screw-like instruments are there which would take a biopsy for you. You may carry out relevant investigations of a patient where you have identified them as having adenomyosis. Couple of additional terminology I would like everybody to know. There's something like atypical polypoidal adenomyoma. I haven't seen any such patient. It's a immunohistochemistry diagnosis where dissecting the endometrium or a DNC specimen would show squamous cell proliferation with complex architecture, cytological atypia, and you would have hypercellular smooth muscles in the stroma. This would be there. It can be there. This kind of histopathology can be there in a young patient or the patient in perimenopausal. Okay. It has a malignant potential. One should be aware regarding this, and for this, in a young patient, hysteroscopic resection of this endometrium, the adenomyomatous polyp in the cavity, or if the patient is in the perimenopausal age group, hysterectomy is the treatment which is suggested. Please, there is another terminology which is called as adult cystic adenomyoma. Congenital and adult. We have a long series of treating patients with adult cystic adenomyoma. In young patient, you would either carry out an hysteroscopy and drainage, which since these collections are near the cavity, and coagulation of lining if permitted, or laparoscopic excision of adenomyomas. These treatments are followed by medical treatment. You would see such kind of elevation on hysteroscopic examination when you have a cystic adenomyoma. You should be knowing adequate depth of penetration through your loop and exact site to which you should be cutting to reach the cavity and drain the content and then coagulate the lining which is there. This is that's the hole in the posterior myometrium through which it was drained. When you can have a cystic adenomyoma, more often these are being misdiagnosed as rudimentary non-communicating horns. Basically, they are cystic adenomyomas. Adult cystic adenomyomas, we have seen often patients who have undergone myomectomy, laparoscopic myomectomy, and subsequently they come to us with cystic adenomyomas. Maybe that's a cystic adenomyoma which is being opened up, and then subsequently you would dissect the adenomyomatous tissue from the normal tissue, take the required sutures to approximate that area. You have such beautiful result following surgery. So this is one. There are many such cystic adenomyomas which you would see. These are preoperative diagnoses in a given patient. MUSA or morphological uterus sonographic assessment criteria, they have already been discussed. We should be true regarding our diagnosis. That's an area in the posterior myometrium which is adenomyotic. Here you have anterior and posterior areas which have diffuse as well as adenomyoma focal. This is a posterior uterine wall, J posterior cavity, completely interrupted junctional zone. That's how you diagnose them as having adenomyosis. The patients, they have more bleeding because of the cavity size which increases. There is improper uterine contraction. The surface area is more. There is increased estrogen. The proangiogenic vascular marker, they are significantly highly expressed, and anti-angiogenic markers, they are reduced. That's how the bleeding is more in this particular group of patients. In general, we have been treating this kind of patient, getting these patients very often, and we treat when patients have acute menstrual bleeding. Oral contraceptive pills in high doses 3 times a day can be given for a week's time, followed by reduction in the dose and total maintenance cycle for 21 days. You can choose to have a contraceptive pill with appropriate progesterone content. Medroxyprogesterone acetate also can be given in doses up to 30 or 40 milligram per day for a week's time, and then reduction in the dose for 21 days. Along with that, antifibrinolytic tranexamic acid, of 1500 milligram to 2 gram per day is used for reduction in the bleeding. I haven't tried intrauterine Foley's catheter as tamponade. Patients who have chronic bleeding can be put on long-term oral contraceptive pills or progestins. Tranexamic acid also can be given along with them intermittently. Specific drugs which are there are Dinoges, GnRH analog, oral GnRH analog, which is not available in the market as yet. Levonorgestrel containing IUD would have a limited role up to, we've seen non-published data of uterine volume measured about 150 to 200 ml volume is suitable for use of LNG IUD. Otherwise, the patient either expels her IUD or it is not so efficient. All of us, we know regarding Dynogest, we know the safety profile. Even we also have seen that the patient would have reduction in the size of adenomyoma when used appropriately in the patient for a longer time. Longer time would mean that treating patients for 1.5 months, 1.5 years to 2 years or more than that. Some role of giving mifepristone also is being published. We have not treated any patient giving mifepristone for adenomyosis. Surgical treatment for abnormal uterine bleeding has been controversial, especially conservative surgical treatment. As Dr. Parul said, a young patient who had come wanted complete reassurance that she would not have recurrence. Anyway, these surgical methods have come from open methods which have been published in the literature in form of various flaps or asymmetric dissection methods. Laparoscopic adenomyomectomy had evolved following these kind of open surgeries. Cystoscopic endometrial resection we carry out. Adenomyoma resection I have not carried out. I have not seen some. I have seen some videos or some doctors resecting adenomyoma from the cavity, which I don't think would be an appropriate method to do it. It's open. The panel is open to discuss regarding this. Resection of adenomyosis partial done generally. I'm not ablation methods, a word to say, we're not discussing this. It has more failure rates. And today we are not discussing the role of interventional radiological procedures, which would have a role. Since we're talking about a hypoestrogenic condition, when the patient has associated bleeding because of hyperplastic endometrium, obviously you would carry out hysteroscopy and resect the endometrium which is there. You saw the cystic glandular hyperplasia which was there. In laparoscopic surgery, it will be partial resection of adenomyoma. We all know these surgeries. These are the serial photographs which they come here, a vertical incision put in the posterior wall, preserving the surface, normal uterine muscles, removal of adenomyomatic tissue. You should know the depth up to which you have to cut. The uterine cavity generally we never open. And then suturing, approximation of the muscle. This patient also had some anterior wall disease which was removed and the uterus was sutured. And you use some anti-adhesion barrier. Here also the serial photograph shows the same thing except for the fact that the incision is kept transverse. Anyway, partial adenomyomectomies are done in younger patient where you would want to preserve, or she wants to preserve the uterus. When there is no additional much pelvic disease, you can offer this kind of treatment followed by medical therapy. The various laparotomy methods, OSADA, it is being published. It's all about diffuse adenomyosis, opening the cavity, creating flaps and suturing and reducing the myometrial bulk. I don't think it's fair to open the uterine cavity. It's all open. We never open uterine cavity during surgery in any adenomyomatic patient, whether she wants fertility or whether she doesn't want fertility. Surgical method, we are all aware. The wedges, they have to be removed in single or multiple. The patients, they have to be clearly said that this is a diffuse disease and it will be partial resection. It would not be complete resection. And the challenges are hard tissue. When you don't preserve appropriate muscle over the surface, it would be difficult for you to close the uterine defect, especially when it's hard. So one has to be careful regarding this. Following adenomyomectomies, we expect reduction in the pain symptoms, bleeding in a given patient. Definitely she would be better. 60% of patients are expected to feel the pain relief up to 6 years or maybe later than that. Treating patients medically following surgery delays the recurrence of disease and the patients are further better. If the patient has a childbearing function over, she has a larger pathology, there are associated endovasculopathies or associated deep infiltrating disease, then you would offer her total lap hysterectomy followed by medical treatment for undiagnosed bowel or bladder disease. If you have diagnosed those diseases before surgery, obviously you would have done some surgical treatment for bladder and bowel disease too for that particular patient. But if after surgery you find out that those disease or those lesions were not discussed with the patient, you may not treat them. Medical treatment is sufficient enough in taking care of that. The retroperitoneum is open, standard hysterectomy. Obviously, you would expect a lot of adhesions in these group of patients. Got to be careful so that you don't injure additionally. Complete parametrial disease, it has to be removed, including rectovaginal disease, to have a proper pain relief in a given patient or even bleeding associated in a given patient. So that's lap hysterectomy, which you would do it, or an abdominal hysterectomy. The vault. To conclude, usually damage to the junctional zone is the primary contributor to adenomyosis. Diagnosis is well established by transvaginal sonography. So you can carry out MRI if you have any diagnostic doubt, but the both is nearly same. For opting good option for a small size uterus when the volume is not too much. Conservative surgeries would require more technical skill. Interventional and radiological interventional technique also they have benefits. So these alternatives are thought about before a radical surgery for that patient. Thank you for your attention and we panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. DVS bhai. Your presentation, we can see it well, but your voice was cracking throughout your presentation. So get checked it done in your laptop or whatever problem. It doesn't look like a internet problem, but some problem in the device. It looks like that. So, but we could see your presentation. Thank you very much for widely covering adenomyosis and AUB in adenomyosis. Adenomyosis is a frustrating disease starting from the diagnosis to the management. Diagnosis was well done by Chirag bhai. Then AUB is well covered by Dr. DVS bhai. Now I invite another frustrating thing with the adenomyosis is dysmenorrhea and the pain in adenomyosis. For that I invite Dr. Tejas Dave. Dr. Tejas bhai is a diploma in endoscopy from France. He is a great gynec laparoscopic surgeon, Puja Hospital, Ahmedabad. His center is also a recognized FOXI recognized center for the gynec endoscopy. He is an ex-honorary laparoscopic surgeon, VS Hospital and SET KM School of the Postgraduate. I invite Dr. Tejas bhai to speak and reduce the pain of the adenomyosis. Dr. Tejas bhai, welcome. Tejas bhai, please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Unmute, right?
Yes, good. Now it's good. Just go ahead.
Clear?
Yeah, now it looks clear. Yes. Go ahead.
So good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank AOGS for this excellent initiative for the knowledge sharing in nice topic, which is a nightmare for the clinicians all throughout the world. And also including me to share some of my thoughts for this nice topic, adenomyosis in pain. Going to the second slide. Wait a minute. Yes, now the varieties have been nicely discussed. It can be diffuse adenomyosis, it can be adenomyotic nodule, or it can be adenomyotic cyst. Whenever there is a collection of chocolate material inside the adenomyotic nodule, it takes the form of cyst and what we call adenomyotic cyst. Now coming straightway to my topic, pain in adenomyosis. Now it is very rare to find the adenomyosis in isolation. Even if we have isolated adenomyosis, the pain can be either isolated pain or it can be along with the other symptoms. Symptoms can be either infertility or AUB. The types of pain include dysmenorrhea. It is usually present in 50% of cases. Now dysmenorrhea again can be spasmodic or congestive. Now congestive dysmenorrhea is the dysmenorrhea or the pain which starts before the onset of menstruation and decreases with the onset of menstruation, and gradually by the day 2 or day 3, it subsides. While congestive dysmenorrhea, it increases with the passage of the menstruation and usually it peaks by the 2nd or 3rd day of menstruation. And dyspareunia. The third pain is the chronic pelvic pain. Whenever there is advanced adenomyosis, it takes the form of chronic persistent pelvic pain, irrespective of the menstrual cycle. It can be during the menstrual cycle, it can be before the cycle, it can be after the cycle, and it is usually present in 15 to 25% of cases. Going to the third thing. Now, why there is pain in adenomyosis? The pathophysiology of adenomyosis pain is that there is increase in certain markers inside the ectopic endometrium or surrounding myometrium. The first is VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor expression. Orezov et al. And Redzinski from Russia, what did they do? Surgically removed specimens of uteruses were analyzed. Along with the histopathology, immunohistochemistry was performed. And during IHC, they found that the VEGF expression was higher in the group of the patients they were having pain. And the VEGF expression was less in the patients who were not having pain or having only AUB or something else. So this is very important. That vascular endothelial growth factor expression in the epithelial cells and the stroma of the ectopic endometrium and surrounding myocytes of myometrium is very important. This is considered as an important pathogenetic mechanism for the allogenesis of adenomyosis. Allogenesis means the reason behind the pain. So this is one thing, increased VEGF expression. Second is this, nerve growth factor. Again, the same type was observed. Immunohistochemistry was done. The patients were divided into two groups, without pain and with pain. The patients who had pain, their surgically removed uterus showed higher level of NGF. NGF is nerve growth factor. Now, this kind of ectopic endometrium or adenomyosis produces this nerve growth factor. It is taken up by the PGP. PGP is the protein gene product which is present inside the nerve fiber near the ectopic endometrium. And this ultimately gives the increased concentration of NGF level and PGP 9.5 positive nerve density in the patients or the group having pain in adenomyosis. Prospective study was done by Zhang et al., which was published in 2010, where they selected the patients who were having pain due to adenomyosis. The endometrial biopsy was performed, and they showed that higher PGP 9.5 positive nerve fibers in the basal layer and functional layer of the endometrium in the pain group. These are important markers. The third is the P2X3 receptor. Again, there is a specific receptor which is expressed in the higher density in the patients are having pain. Now, this receptor is regulated by the ERK. What is ERK? Extracellular regulated protein kinases. Ultimately, this affects the cyclic AMP pathway. And we all know that the cyclic AMP pathway is responsible for the pain in the adenomyosis. These three are the nice tumor markers. Now, they don't have any clinical value as of now, but ultimately the research will be focused on these lines. Which are the medicines which can decrease the VEGF expression? Which are the medicines which can decrease the NGF concentration? And which are the medicines which can lead to decreased P2X3 receptor concentration? This is the future of adenomyosis in pain. Diagnostic model is nicely covered by Chirag, ultrasonography, MRI. Again, research material like proteomics and transcriptomics. These are the research which is in the pipeline, which will have some biomarkers for adenomyosis in future. Not only adenomyosis, but as an endometriosis whole. Coming to the management part, we know that there are two kinds of management, surgical and medical. Surgical again can be divided into conservative and radical. Radical means removal. Isolated adenomyosis is rare, but whenever there is isolated adenomyoma, we can do the nodule excision. The clinical experience of mine, if DVSB remembers, in one of the workshops, there was a classical case of uterine fibroid. And I was the person to point out that this can be adenomyotic nodule. How do we know that? Whenever you are filtrating vasopressin, if there is irregular and asymmetric distribution of vasopressin over the fibroid surface, this can be the first operative sign that this can be adenomyotic nodule and not the fibroid. Of course, it can be done. Nodule excision can be done. It is not as easy as the myomectomy, but yes, it can be done. Wedge resection. From personal experience, we can say that wedge resection has some role in infertility part. Along with it also decreases the pain. The important thing is that before putting incision over the uterus, just decide that how much wedge you want to reset. 1/3 part, 1/4 part, 1/5, 1/2, whatever it is. Because it is usually a surgical tendency that, okay, little more, little more, little more. And when you exceed certain limit, the approximation really becomes difficult. That is why always decide beforehand that how much wedge you want to remove. It can be little, but that little is useful to the patient. Third is cyst excision. We have 5 to 6 nice cases of adenomyotic cyst. Whenever you found that is okay, adenomyotic nodule, you put an incision, the chocolate material comes out. Drain it completely and remove the cyst wall as if you are doing the ovarian cystectomy. So these are the conservative surgeries. Whenever the childbearing has been completed and patient has attained certain age, of course we can remove uterus. Don't forget to remove ovaries, because if you keep the ovaries, this is going to cause the residual ovarian syndrome, which is worse to operate as a secondary surgery. Coming to medical management, there are plethora of the medical management. Whenever we open up any endoscopy journal or infertility journal of international repute, you will find at least 5 to 10 articles on endometriosis or adenomyosis. And we know that because there is no clear-cut pathophysiology or etiology, whatever medicine comes into the market, we can try it on something. From our knowledge, we know that adenomyosis is a disease where there is increased estrogen and decreased progesterone. So whatever medicine is going to decrease the estrogen concentration inside the endometrium or the myometrium is going to work on adenomyosis. How much pain it is going to relieve, it's a matter of debate that we are going to solve next 5 or 7 minutes. The list is GnRH agonist with or without antagonist, continuous OC pills, progesterone molecules, pumps, selective progesterone receptor modulators, aromatase inhibitors, again LNG IUD. I have taken it as a part of medical management. Now how it works? It decreases the foci of ectopic endometrial tissue inside the myometrium. It improves the contractility of the uterus. Because of the presence of the ectopic endometrium inside the myometrium, there is abnormal contractility during menstruation or in between menstruation. This medicine increases the or improves the contractility of the uterus, and most importantly, this decreases the prostaglandins. Of course, we can always try NSAID or the naproxen, which are the proven analgesic agents. Let us go one by one. GnRH agonist, leuprolide acetate or triptorelin. It can be given either as 3.75 monthly or 11.25 quarterly. Whenever we are intending to give it for more than 3 to 4 months, we have to add the ADVEC therapy. It's a known thing. Whenever we are going 11.25 quarterly, that higher initial concentration of the medicine produces initial flare-up of the symptoms. At that time, we may add antagonist for the first week of the GnRH agonist administration. This is found to be extremely helpful because the patients are quite apprehensive. If there is increase in the symptom for the first 5 or 10 days, they'll immediately come back to you. This antagonist is useful to prevent the flare-up of symptoms in the first week of the GnRH agonist administration. Continuous OC pills. Now coming to the oral medications, whenever there is economic considerations, patient can be put on the continuous oral contraceptive pills. It can be anything. It can be levonorgestrel with any primary medicine or whatever kind of OC pills we are comfortable with. It can be prescribed to the patients. This is quite helpful. The aim is to produce the persistent state of amenorrhea. Coming to Dynogest. Now Dynogest, DVSB has nicely touched the subject. Dynogest can be tried from 2 mg once a day. Again, the aim is to achieve the complete amenorrhea. If there is no amenorrhea, it can be increased 2 mg BID. It can be increased up to 8 mg per day. There were nice trials across the Europe, Australia and Japan. Initially, Dynogest was tried for 12 weeks. The patients who were comfortable with Dynogest administration And those who have quite a significant decrease in the pain symptoms, they were asked to join for the further period of again 55 to 50, 52 to 55 weeks. So that study went on for 65 to 68 weeks. The patients were quite comfortable. After that 65 or 68 weeks of study, patients were medicine free. And almost half of the patients, they were symptom free for another 6 to 8 months. So to conclude, Dynogest, that is a kind of progesterone molecule that can be effective to achieve quite a significant reduction in the pain symptom. We can try any medicine, medroxyprogesterone acetate or Registan, whatever it is, but this has found to be quite effective. Now pumps. Now what is selective progesterone receptor molecules? Now any selective molecules are the molecules. We all know that there are two kinds of progesterone receptors all throughout the body, PR1 and PR2. They are modified by only one gene, that is PR gene. The medicine or the agent, there's a selective agonist action on some organ and selective antagonist action on the another organ is called selective receptor modulator. We have selective estrogen receptor modulators as well as selective progesterone receptor modulator. The selective progesterone receptor modulators, by increasing the progesterone concentration at certain sites and decreasing the certain sites, it has found quite a useful number of applications in modern gynecology. And one of them is endometriosis and adenomyosis. Mifepristone can be tried 50 milligram per day for at least 6 months. It is also found to be effective for decreasing pain. Again, esoprisnil along ulipristal, these are quite effective molecules. Now, thing is that the wonderful or the beauty of the human body is that all these three medicines, mifepristone, esoprisnil, and ulipristal, they all are effective in decreasing the pain. But again, they all have different kind of actions on normal endometrium or the progesterone receptors outside the pelvic organs. One of the important things is that they have also got progesterone receptors inside the central nervous system, which is important for the sexual and reproductive life of the female. So all these three different molecules have different kind of sexual arousal properties into the females. Again, going to this thing, levonorgestrel, that is LNG-IOD. It's a simple thing we can put inside the endometrial cavity, and it releases the fixed concentration, that is 20 milligram per day in the woman's cycle, woman's endometrium, again increasing the concentration of the local progesterone and decreasing the pain. Again, quite a number of modern management, that is uterine artery embolization and USG guided focal destruction, that is HIFU. I'm thankful to Dr. Kuldeep for suggesting me to include both these things into my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Kuldeep. Now, uterine artery embolization again was starting 27 to 28 patients in Australia. They have quite a substantial reduction of pain into their cycles. It lasted for almost 6 to 8 months. And after 6 to 8 months, the patients were asked, would you like to go for again UAE? And again, 50% of the patients, they were prepared to undergo second trial of UAE into them. It shows the acceptance into it. Primarily, it may not be useful for, say, cure of the disease completely. But whenever patient wants to defer the surgery for any reason or not comfortable with the medical management, this is one of the modality. Lastly, high density, high intensity focused ultrasound. But again, there are multiple factors which affect it. Most commonly, we know that the adenomyosis affects the posterior wall, and this has to be given transabdominally. So thickness of the abdominal wall, adenomyosis of the anterior wall, coexistent pathology like fibroid on the uterine anterior wall, they affect the results of this HIFU, and that is why it has not become quite popular. So these were my view for the adenomyosis and pain. I have tried to cover the pathophysiology, symptomatology, medical management, and surgical management. Thank you very much for the patient hearing.
Tejas bhai, thank you very much for a very nice presentation on adenomyosis and pain. Very frustrating because very difficult to treat, and simultaneously we also want patient to conceive also many a time. So that difficulty, how to manage, we have a national faculty with us, Dr. Kuldeep Jain. I request Dr. Parul Kotadawala to introduce Dr. Kuldeep Jain and invite him for the presentation on adenomyosis and infertility.
Okay, thank you, Sunil. Dr. Kuldeep is a personal friend since many years, and he is a pioneer in IVF in North India and especially Delhi. He spent a significant time in Singapore in KKIVF, and he is still associated with them in his pursuit of IVF. He has two IVF centers in Delhi and Faridabad, both known as KJ IVF, Kuldeep Jain IVF. Hello.
Tejas bhai, request to mute your. Okay, I will mute him. Okay.
Kuldeep has another big contribution to our fraternity in form of he's one of the pioneers. I think he was the founder, secretary, and president of Indian Fertility Society, which is a branch of, Indian arm of International Fertility Society. He also was an organizing secretary for the International Fertility Society conference in Delhi, the suburb of Delhi. He has worked a lot in FOXI also. He is member board of IFFS from 2016 to 19, organizing secretary, as I mentioned, chairperson of Infertility Committee of AOGD, that is Association of Gynecologists of Delhi. He has been the chairman of endometriosis committee of FOXI till last year. And he is North Zone coordinator for the infertility committee of FOXI. And above all, he is candidate for vice president of FOXI from North Zone this year. That election is coming up very soon. And you may hear from him in that regard also. But most importantly, today he is going to touch upon a topic which is one of the most foxing thing for us, infertility and adenomyosis, because this is where we have not been able to give a lot of hope to our patients, and we keep our fingers crossed. There are new advances in dealing with this area, and especially IVF. Kuldeep, please. Please unmute. Huh?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunil, Dr. Parul. It is really a pleasure to be connecting with all of you at Ahmedabad Obstetrics and Gynae Society. And for that, I am really thankful to Dr. Rajal, President of Ahmedabad Society, Dr. Sunil, General Secretary, and of course, Dr. Parul, who has actually facilitated this meeting. So this is really wonderful connecting with everyone and all members of Ahmedabad Society. I will be speaking today on a subject which is really frustrating, as all my previous speakers, they have really highlighted and they have actually made the base for my talk. Whenever we talk of adenomyosis, it is always frustrating, whether it is menorrhagia, whether it is pain, and for that matter, it is infertility, because it is a disease of reproductive age group. So all these patients, they are actually having all symptoms. Usually it is combined. They are having menorrhagia, pain, and infertility. So previous speakers, they have already highlighted the three parts. So I will be focusing my talk on infertility and adenomyosis or adenomyoma. With the permission of chair, I take this opportunity to introduce my candidature for Vice President, Foxy North Zone. I have been serving Foxy for last 35 years in different positions. And my last tenure, last assignment with Foxy was as the chairperson endometriosis committee. And during that time, actually, this tenure was really fruitful, wonderful, and I could do a lot of activities and help Foxy, all Foxians throughout the country. And that gave me impetus to work a little more for Foxy. So now I am looking for a bigger role in Foxy as Vice President candidate from North Zone. So I request, seek your blessings and support in this endeavor to serve all Foxians in coming election. So I request all of you to cast your vote from 1st September to 10th September in my favor. Coming on to the topic of today is that is adenomyoma or adenomyosis and infertility. This already has been highlighted by all previous speakers, and I will just add the thing that when we are having a patient who is, apart from having pain, bleeding, and infertility, then the management and the problems becomes multiplied. We cannot do a surgery which is definitive answer. We have to conserve the uterus. At the same time, these patients, they are having poor reproductive outcome. Even if they conceive by your treatment, usually the obstetric outcome is not very, very favorable. Either it ends up into miscarriage or in preterm labor or antepartum hemorrhage. So the problems of these patients, they do not end just by conception. So in next 20 minutes, I am going to cover these few questions. How to diagnose is already very well highlighted and very well discussed by Dr. Chirag. So I will not be touching the diagnosis part. Does it affect fertility? Yes, there have been actually a lot of association, and the contradictory reports are also there in literature that it may not be affecting fertility, but most of the literature suggests that the fertility is affected in all these patients. What are the options available to us? Certainly we will like to discuss. Can surgery improve the outcome of ART? I will like to share my experience. What does literature say? And are there any recommendation and take home from my talk? So these are some of the points which I am going to highlight. This is very well highlighted, so I will not touch. Again, MRI is also highlighted. Only thing which I will like to highlight, junctional zone thickness. Previously it was 12 millimeter, but now the recent literature suggests that 15 millimeter. So that is the only change. Otherwise, it is very nicely highlighted in the previous talk. Coming on to how does it affect fertility? There are multiple theories actually on that part. All these patients, they are having chronic inflammatory conditions within the myometrium, and that leads to the local estrogen production, leading to the dysperistalsis of the uterus, of the tubal junction, and that's why that is causing the defective implantation as well as the fertility. Again, there is one paper, this in 2012, they have suggested that there is alteration in the adhesion molecules, cell proliferation, apoptosis, and there is a lot of free radical metabolism going on in these patients, and they all does affect the fertility in that particular patient. This is one area, altered junctional zone already has been highlighted, and this is a very close association. This is having very close association as far as the adenomyosis is concerned. There is a distinct change in all patients, and that is one of the criteria which is used for the diagnosis in MRI as well as in ultrasound. So there is a persistent thickening, and that goes on increasing, and usually it starts from the posterior junctional zone, and when it becomes diffuse, then of course the anterior junctional zone is also affected. So whenever you are having a junctional zone which is deficient and it starts getting thickened, then certainly a diagnosis of adenomyosis is there, and defective junctional zone leads to the all changes which I have already highlighted. And it was seen even in younger women who are having pelvic endometriosis as well as adenomyosis. So alteration of junctional zone is one of the important factor in defective implantation in these patients. And many a times these patients, they do have not only the defective implantation, but they are associated with placenta accreta and placental problems like persistent trophoblastic tumors and all that is quite high in adenomyosis. Now coming on to the options available to us, we are having multiple options to these patients, but nothing, no intervention is satisfactory. That is the problem, and there is not much literature to suggest that this is better than other. Most of the report in favor of these treatments, they are coming as a case report series or very small number studies. So that is the problem. All literature is having a lot of limitation when it comes to deciding which management is better for your patient. None of the RCTs or Cochrane database is available which can say that this is a definite treatment for your patient in what you call infertile patients. Now, these are some of the modalities which I am going to discuss. We are having medical management, which is a primary first line treatment for all these patients.